Hey there, this is George Strezov with the new episode of For Music's The Soundtrack podcast. And in this episode, I'm pleased to have as my guests the composer duo of Yannick Süß and Robin Birner, also known as Audinity. And these guys have written and produced the music for Knights of Honor 2, Victoria 3, Crusader Kings 3, Royal Court, also Foundation, which is quite successful, and many others. So anyway, without further ado, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, George. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. We've known each other for quite some time, and we've been geeking about, film and game music for quite some time. So it's nice to be able to actually put this into a more formal setting. So anyway, before we start, do you want to maybe also introduce yourself individually? Tell us how you started out with music, and also I would love to get each one of you's first memory, like first musical memory with each other. That's a hard question. Yeah.
So thanks for the intro, George. I'm Yannick. I am one half of Audinity that I'm running together with Robin for like 12 years now. And how did I get into music and into video games especially? That's a good question. I mean, of course, I've been active with music for a long time. I played the piano, played some recorders, like the usual stuff that each kid starts with, like recorder lessons and stuff. But that was really cool, actually. Some people don't like it. I really loved it. I'm still playing until today, even on some video games. That was pretty cool. And and I think something that influenced me a lot and ultimately led into the composing niche as well was my piano teacher back when I was 10 or 11 when I started learning piano, because I didn't really want to play a lot after like notes and like rehearse all the time, practice all the time. I love to practice. Each day after school I spend hours on the piano, right? But I only wanted to play what I like my favorite soundtracks, my favorite pieces by ear. And I just did that and rearranged that kind of, but really rehearsing note by note, that wasn't really my thing for a long time. And my piano teacher, he supported that. I mean, sometimes you would expect, just practice fingering, practice sight reading and stuff like that, probably. But it really supported me in that, what I really like to do. And that freedom also led to rearranging stuff and ultimately also doing some recordings of favorite soundtracks, like covers from myself, just for my own pleasure. And then, as I was also an active gamer, I got into composing as part of kind of a detour when I was in a fan forum for my favorite video game, The Guild. The Guild 2. Yeah. All right. And I played that for a really long time and really avidly. And as I was like rearranging all these tracks from that soundtrack on the piano and playing it by ear, I noticed when they said, we're programming a fan mod to that game, right? I said, I can write some music for that. Okay. Yeah. I had no idea what I was doing. I was 16 years old, still in school, but they said, yeah, sure, fine, let's do that. And I started writing the first couple of pieces. And then, then the publisher of the Guild bought the project and was on board like semi-professionally with 16 years old. And it was an official add-on to that game. And that's also when I met with Robin on another fan project, for, what was it? I think Gothic?
Gothic 3. It was a community story project for the German game Gothic 3. Yes.
Yes. And we both were on that project just as a hobbyist. And then we said, okay, yeah, I really like this guy, and we're getting along quite well, and he's not living that far actually from where I was. So yeah, we said, okay, maybe you know stuff about writing music, producing music. I try to write music for that game. Let's work together on the Guild 2 Renaissance, which was that fan add-on, and that's how we ended up working together and did
that's the start.
Yeah, it was so. I think that is the story. Yes, my musical journey started with recorder lessons. I hated recorder lessons, so I'm more normal, I guess.
Obviously, these are recorders, so yeah.
Yeah. Afterwards, I didn't want to play any instrument until I was like 10 years old, and I got really bad grades at music, like the subject music at school. And my reaction to that was like, Mom, I think we should buy a piano. I have bad grades in music, which is kind of ridiculous if you think about it. Like I could have just studied more, and
sure.
that would have fixed it. But no, I wanted to start learning piano, and my first piano it cost 100 euros, and when you hit one key, like you could hear 3 notes at the same time. So that's like the instrument I learned piano on. We should have just bought an e-piano, like
sure.
in retrospect. So I played piano, classical piano mostly. Then got bored by it. Then started to play my favorite video game soundtracks on piano, like Yannick, as well. And then I went on to like playing church organ and synthesizers in rock bands, and I always was a gamer, mostly strategy games, historical strategy games, and I thought like, okay, somebody has to write this music, and so I searched for the composers and how they wrote this music. For my favorite games, and then I realized, okay, so I don't need a real orchestra to like produce this kind of music. I can just do it in a studio or like in a digital audio workstation at my computer at home. Yeah, and then I just try to produce some music on my own, like in my free time, being 15, 16 years old. And yeah, I also started to work on video game fan projects like mods, mostly for the Total War series. Then I ended up working on a mod which wanted to port the Total War game Medieval 2 into the Gothic universe, and the same guys were also part of the Gothic free community story project, which Yannick was a part of, and so they invited me to that project, and that's how I met Yannick. Yeah, and like the idea to found Audinity, basically it came out of a conversation at night. I think it was around I don't know, like maybe 10 p.m. At night, and it was more like you know that scene from How I Met Your Mother. We should open a bar. It was more like this kind of an idea. We should totally open a company, and write music together. But somehow it worked out. Although I have to say in the beginning, like our musical language was quite different. Like the stuff he enjoyed and the stuff I enjoyed, it was quite different. We both enjoyed the same kind of classical music though, so there were some similarities.
Well, obviously he enjoyed recorders and new organs. So
yeah, I think we can both agree that Baroque music is okay.
Yeah. Which can be heard in as an influence, and for example, Victoria 3 is very much not that much Baroque, but still classical in a sense. And so this was actually, you kind of got me into my next question, which would be obviously the first question, at least that comes to my mind when it comes to like a collective as like yours, and that would be, how do you write music together?
Well, first of all, I think it's we both write music in a very similar way to start off. So we both learned a keyboard instrument. Yannick was a very good, still is a good piano player.
I was
to
not
this
anymore.
day. Okay.
But thank you.
I think you still are. So we both kind of sketch a lot of our stuff on piano, like virtual piano, obviously, and we send back and forth ideas, and talk about how it should sound like then, like what kind of instruments, what kind of musical references we have for a project. And then, somebody just starts fleshing out sketches, and then we share the sketches and the arrangements as they progress and develop. And just, we just wait for feedback from the other side and ideas, and form like our own musical universe, I would say. And then we just set boundaries, and we try to stay within those boundaries. And then in the end, if you know your boundaries and limitations, I think it doesn't matter who writes which track, because they all end up quite in a similar language.
By boundaries, do you mean instrumentation-wise, or also like don't use jazzy chords, for example, or
instrumental boundaries. The harmonies kind of, I would say, come naturally.
Okay.
Like we never set ourselves like boundaries in that regard. It's just we mostly write music for period games, like historical games. So they are kind of harmonies you just use, which fit towards the period you're in. Yeah, but Yannick, did we ever set boundaries in terms of harmonies?
Well, not harmonic boundaries, I think. No, it's more like you said, instruments that we want to use or feature, also which comes into play when we are going to live record these, right? We want to only use certain instruments that we know we're going to record live at a later stage, maybe that fit that time period that we're writing for. Also, we extensively compare like reference tracks that we either get from clients or that we come up with ourselves. Like we say, okay, this music from the Middle Ages, I don't know, that could be a good fit for that scene in the game, or for that type of music that we need to write. Could we get some inspiration from that? What can we draw from that? So there's discussions involved in the start, but then we work relatively independent from each other when it comes to composition, but we share back and forth the tracks a lot before we send anything to the client. So both of us need to be really happy and have influenced the tracks and also the compositions, of course. But it's not that we sit together in one room and say, like a band, like the Beatles. Yeah. Okay, let's try this chord together. How does that work? Oh no, maybe No, that's really not how we work, because we're not sitting in the same studio here. But we have found a good way to collaborate on individual tracks, and also on projects as a whole.
So how do you decide how to split the cues? Because, for example, do you have something like, Yannick, I'm very natural at writing action music, for example, and Robin is very good at ambient. And do you split it like this, using each other's strengths and weaknesses, or do you just split it out?
Yeah, it depends a bit from project to project, right? It's of course both of us have individual strength that we have, and and also it's important for us to have a consistent sound in the games, right? We don't want to make a game soundtrack, for example, sound like it's coming from two different people, or avoid that as much as possible. But because although we have come together pretty well, I think, in the way that we sound at Audinity, it's of course a question how we distribute the tracks between each other when working on a project to make that to avoid that risk. So when, for example, there's some ambient music for a certain scene, for example, you're in a dungeon or whatever, and it has a certain amount of background music, maybe one of us writes that, because then it sounds from coming from one person, and it's not
Okay.
or one of us has great ideas for the action music in the game, and he starts fleshing out that. But we can also draw from each other what they have fleshed out, and what we can use for our own tracks. So it really comes down to individual projects and what they require.
Also, I would like to add that usually when you're on a project and you write music, you have a client, right? So you're thinking like what fits to the project, to the film, to the video game, and what would the client love to hear, and what would the audience love to hear as well. Well, for us, it's also, at least for me, maybe also for Yannick, I think also for Yannick, it's also like, what would Yannick love to hear? So that also kind of unifies a voice, because you know what the other side likes and doesn't like.
Yep.
And it's like a first, almost like a filter you add to the music. And certain stuff just won't get past that filter, and that makes it sound like Audinity in the end.
Yeah, it's similar to, for example, when you work with a director with the same, for example, the director, and how he or she feels about a certain scene, and you don't go too crazy with different stuff unless needed, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and that also helps us to be a bit more efficient when working on certain tracks, because it's kind of an internal quality control as we're working in a team. Maybe it's a creative process can be difficult. I mean, sometimes you run into a certain corner when writing a track, and you don't really know how to proceed with that and where to go, maybe. And the other person, like Robin, can help me try to find a way out, or try to tell, okay, I think what you could do is take this instrument or bring that section back, or whatever it is, or also maybe that isn't really what the scene is about, or it's not really capturing what we're trying to achieve there musically for the game. The mood that we try to set, or the feeling that we're trying to create for the players. So maybe we can try a bit more in that direction, and we can go back and forth a bit on individual tracks, even though one person is actively composing a track, right?
So does this mean that you argue a lot, or?
Officially, we don't argue. Of course not.
We never argue. No.
Yeah. And since you've written so much music for video games already, are you first of all, on the creative side of things, what is for each one of you, what is the hardest type of music? Is there a hard type of music in like action or ambient or exploration or something like this, or linear or adaptive, for example? Is there a certain type of music that is a challenge for you?
Well, I think any type of music is challenging if you haven't written like 10 hours in that style before. For me personally, I think action music in the kind of video games we are scoring is the most challenging piece of a puzzle, which has like, there are some reasons why. First of all, you could always like cheat yourself through action music, like relying more on like loops and like continuous patterns. But then at the same time, we always, like myself and also Yannick, we both always liked music which is more like fleshed out in a symphonic way. That's like the soundtracks we gravitate towards in also other mediums, film music. Also classical works are always like music which is more like symphonic in its nature. So we try to bring this aesthetic also to action music in video games, which of course is challenging in a way, because sometimes the music system, like you need to make it fit to the music system, or you need to make the music system fit to that kind of music, or the gameplay, which has its challenges. So yeah, I think it is mostly action music, especially when you want to blend symphonic stuff with like historical stuff, or period instruments. Yeah, but I don't know how is it for you, Yannick?
Yeah, I think great points there. And while you were talking, I was thinking a bit about the question. I thought, okay, but actually, I think everything can be challenging, and not really as just from a genre or music type perspective, but also but in every kind of way. It's like, for example, action music can be, or tension music can be super challenging when in terms of getting the intensity right that you need for the game, right? Mood music and ambient music can be really challenging if you want to if you want to make it unique, for example. I mean, I was thinking, okay, if we write the 20th medieval video game now, maybe we know how to write medieval music, right? But we don't want to recreate the same thing over and over again. So that can be super challenging, and I think that is super important for me as well. Not trying to not stay in that genre bubble and just doing what you know is working, but also trying to find a new angle towards medieval music, for example, and that is also important and challenging for simpler music that maybe is ambient music, or could be ambient music, but it's challenging in a different way. I mean, of course, genre-wise, it can be challenging to adapt a genre you're not used to, but you get a routine for certain styles and for certain techniques that you're using, and it's, of course, I think, okay to reuse certain patterns and techniques that that's working for what I want to achieve in a game. But of course, you want to stay creative and want to stay unique and write a unique soundtrack that is really working for that type of game. And medieval music, for example, can sound vastly different from game to game, and that's how it should sound, because the games themselves are different as well.
Yeah,
it's not just like symphonic music and some ethnic or historical period instruments on top of that can be vastly different kind of music within that boundary,
Yeah, and you can get stuff like the King Arthur soundtrack, the Guy Ritchie movie, and they were sounding completely, absolutely weird compared to another soundtrack that revolves around medieval instruments.
Yeah.
For me, I would my biggest weakness, and that's for me, it's really hard. This is me opening up, but for me, it's really hard to write ambient music. And do you know one of the most amazing for me game soundtracks is World of Warcraft, Jason Hayes. Mm-hmm. And there was one piece, I think it was Westfall, when you get to the Westfall at the beginning of, if you're playing like human in the Alliance. And then there's like this, just like string chord, high strings, valence. Then it like fades out, and then you have like a solo French horn, da-dee-da-dee-da. Mm-hmm. And then fades away, and then something else happens, and it's so beautiful yet so simple. And for me, whenever I try to do something like this, I'm like, oh, I'm cheating. I mean, this is like cheating. It's very. I mean, it's really hard to do, but it's yet so easy to do. So I'm kind of like, are they paying me to write a single melody? Maybe I should write 7 counterpoints and I don't know, something different. Yeah, but
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and simple doesn't mean that it's easy to write it, because you can't hide anything.
Yep.
Just everything is there, and you hear everything. You can't just hide anything behind a big orchestra
Yes.
and cover and really like getting to the point in a simple arrangement or in a small instrumentation, that can be super difficult. I agree.
Well, especially for ambient music, it's difficult to really judge it in terms of, is it too much or is it too less or is it just right? Also, like, do you want really like standout melodies in there or not? Because like we are scoring mostly grand strategy games. Like most of the games we have scored as grand strategy games, and the player, you know, many of the players out there, you know, they spend like 1,000 hours in those games. So if you're too melodic, they will just turn off the music at some point. But at the same time, you don't want to just, you know, say nothing with your ambient music and just make it, you know, purely like mood music, which cannot stand out in any way. So like finding the right balance, I think that's challenging. Also not using the same instruments all over again, and finding like different unique voices within a game. That's also yet another challenge in ambient music. Yeah,
that's right. And now from the technological point of view, do you know game engines? Are you implementing the music yourselves, or do you think that you should stick to the more creative side of things? And
well, we are in a lucky position that usually there are other people on the teams that are implementing the music, so we can mainly focus on the creative side and production side. But of course, it's important to understand what the engine or middleware is capable of doing, or what is required for the music system that you develop together with the audio designers, to make sure that you get what that this is working in the game, what you're doing. Like, so you have to have an understanding for that, even if you're not actively implementing the music yourself.
We have implemented music in the past, but like the bigger the project is, the less likely it is that you are actually implementing the music in the end, because usually they have a team taking care of that task. But as Yannick said, we need to understand the music system and also what's capable. And for us, it's not always possible, but usually we try to develop the music system together with the audio team.
Is any of the more recent soundtracks that you did, are they like with adaptive music, or do you think that? Honestly, I don't remember right now like a grand strategy game with an adaptive soundtrack. Maybe Medieval. Medieval hasn't. Not Medieval. Like Total War, the Total War series. They have some sort of an adaptive music, correct? Or
yeah. I mean, basically, most of the video game music is in some way adaptive. Of course, even if it's just a loop, it's kind of adaptive, because not really that linear. The piece itself is linear, but the system itself can be a bit adaptive. Sometimes we have certain adaptive elements or dynamic music elements in the music that we write. For example, a mood track can consist of a couple of layers, or you can take away certain layers and it still works. So you have more variation within a track and can make more use of one mood track, for example. Or in another game, maybe we try to make the music react a bit more to certain battle scenarios.
Yeah, that's what I meant by adaptive. Yeah.
So we had that, for example, in Knights of Honor recently, Knights of Honor 2.
Like horizontally, vertically, so like in different sections or in different stems as well?
Not really like different layers. Correct me if I'm wrong, Robin. But it's more like, okay, we have a intro phase where the armies are standing opposite to each other on the battlefield. Then they start marching towards each other. Maybe then there's a
transition, and then you get to
transition.
another.
We have transitions, and then we have certain control over the intensity of the music with limitations.
Of course.
It's not a super adaptive soundtrack. Of course, you can have basically endless opportunities or possibilities in other games, but these grand strategies or strategy games that we are working on usually are not really the kind of games where you have super adaptive and fragmented music. Or at least the games that we work on, the fans also like to have certain musical development and focus on the compositional side. So try to have that as well.
Yeah, grand strategy games often have like linear, fleshed out music, which is something we really enjoy writing a lot. Mainly because we also enjoyed listening to that kind of music during our teenage days playing video games. But also I think both approaches can work. Also in the games we are scoring, it's not like one is right, the other one is wrong. It's just it also depends a lot on what does the developer, what do they want to communicate to the player. Like when you have like a big historical battle scene, like is it the fate of a soldier, or is it more like a picture approach? Like you see the whole battlefield from above, and you're scoring it from that kind of perspective. I think that also influences the way the music should be composed for such a scene.
Gotcha. And because you mentioned just now that people kind of expect to have like linear music, like a musical form, and they enjoy a musical form in a strategy game. Do you think that gamers are like the last bastion of people who appreciate soundtracks?
That's difficult to say. I still because I still enjoy some film soundtracks coming out. I also enjoy some video soundtracks which get released, but I also don't like some video game soundtracks which get released because they are the opposite of what I like. They're not fleshed out. They have an highly adaptive music system in the background, and that kind of makes the music sound less musical, because the music in the game is more used as a sound effect and not as a piece of music. Sometimes that happens on some projects, but I think in general, yes, the video game community is incredibly appreciative of music, and you can use really weird music in video games, and you can get away with it. Like you can do atonal music. You can use historical instruments which are not tuned perfectly, and nobody will complain about it. Although they're gonna listen to like bad intonation for I don't know, like maybe 20 hours. Nobody complains about it, or more. Yeah, nobody complains about it. That is rare to find. So yeah, I think the video game community is special in that regard.
Yannick? I thought you wanted to say something.
I was just thinking.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't have much to add there. Robin summarized it perfectly.
All right.
I agree with him.
What is because you've had the opportunity to work with different orchestras, with different ensembles, different soloists as well, all throughout the world, and obviously you have made different soundtracks like Victoria 3, which is very, I would say, naked in a way because it's so fleshed out. And then you have made also some I don't know, Crusader Kings, for example, is like very epic. Knights of Honor is also big orchestra soloists. So now you have, I would say, lots of experience with this. And what is the most important thing when it comes to producing soundtracks from that scape? What are the problems?
Well, when it comes to combining historical instruments and symphony orchestra, of course, intonation. We are very fortunate to work together with soloists, which are, they come from a studio background mostly, so they are aware of, those issues. And usually we get stuff from them which is like integrates perfectly into a live symphony orchestra recording. But that could be really challenging, of course. Also, like just the logistics of it. Like you record the orchestra, you have to score prep everything. You record the soloists. You have to deliver stems. It's like there's a lot of logistical stuff happening in the background to make it all possible and to piece it together in the end and make it work. So you need to plan ahead, and also you need to schedule in some time.
Yeah, and do you adjust, for example, because of the historical instruments? Have you adjusted the tuning, for example, of so like not on, because most sample libraries are 4/4/0. So I know that in Germany orchestras play at 4/4/3. Correct me if I'm wrong. But for right. Historical instruments, I suppose it's a lower like intonation. Have you had to adjust the pitch, or?
Well, it depends on like when we combine historical instruments and like a live orchestra, we pitch the historical instruments up.
Yeah.
So they are in tune with the orchestra. If it's just historical instruments, usually we have, somebody starts with a recording, and then the other guys kind of just try to fit in. So we have some stuff on Knights of Honor which has microtonality in the Arabian stuff, right, Yannick? Not that I'm saying something which is incorrect. And then we have, like for example, I recorded my wife playing the recorder, because I hate playing recorder, but my wife is a really good recorder player. And I recorded her for like some of the chamber music in Knights of Honor, like which is just like medieval instruments. And we never checked, how is the recorder tuned. We just listened to what the other guys have done and then adapt it.
And one challenge in that regard is maybe to also get the performance right, because when writing some music with a certain requirement for authenticity, so to say historically or ethnical, with a certain flavor, the performance is of course a big part of that, and trying to get that right when it's a remote recording session, or if it's an orchestra that needs to perform in a certain way, that is of course a challenge, and that is something we pay a lot of attention to, so that it really transports the feeling, because when you're recording musicians live, which is of course a big luxury sometimes to do, and but you really want to get the best performance out of that.
Yeah, and time is running faster and faster. Yeah, every minute.
Yeah,
every minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also have both of you have kind of different things that you do on the musical spectrum. So, for example, Robin, you mix and do the post production on other projects. And Yannick, you also work hard to put the video game music into the concert hall. So first, let's start, Robin. Let's start with you. So, what is the most important thing that you've learned from mixing? Because when you mix different projects, you don't have much control onto things, how things are made, composed, arranged, orchestrated, recorded, etc. So you end up kind of at the final stage, I suppose. So have you learned from any of those mistakes, and have you learned things that could be helpful to, for example, people listening to this podcast?
Well, yes, you're right. I don't have like total control. I cannot change the arrangement in the orchestration. I can mute some stems maybe if I think that improves the final result, or like my client and I, we both agree that it improves the final result, of course. But yeah, when it comes to recording, usually I want to be involved and also have a say, like how it's going to be recorded. Also, line up like section sizes, for example, and if we split the orchestra or if we don't split it. So I have some control over that. And again, like what I've learned by mixing other people's music is mostly like, how is this music, put together?
Yeah.
And that's like, for me, is the most interesting aspect of it, because you can somehow see that really a lot of the final end result, especially when it comes to orchestral music, is purely based on your own skills in regards to arrangement and orchestration.
And
like
composition, yeah.
And composition, yeah. But if it's well arranged, if a composition is well arranged and orchestrated, it's so much easier for the musicians to play it. And then the final result is so much better automatically. Like you don't even have to think about EQ or, a lot of post-production. It's more about finding the best musical take, doing some fine adjustments. And the more I do it and the longer I've been doing it, the more I realize that it's all about doing less than more recordings.
Sure.
It's like respect the original recording as much as possible, and then you're gonna end up with something which A, sounds unique, and B, also works better.
Yeah. And since you mentioned lineups, and what do you prefer, recording recording the orchestra together or in stems?
Well, Yannick and I, we both prefer the orchestra together, but of course that's not always possible, and that's also not always the best idea when it comes to certain like musical styles, I would say.
But musically is better, I think. Or
yeah, musically it is better for sure. You just get more better phrasing, I would say, and also the sound of the orchestra, especially on swells like crescendos and stuff like that. It's just a different sound if the entire orchestra does it together, as opposed to just single sections doing a crescendo. It adds up.
And also sometimes I found out that, for example, I did a film a couple of years back, and there was like this. Obviously, it was piano, but there was like this piano like solo, and then strings come in afterwards. And so usually we give like 8 clicks, and then we start recording. So the strings start playing, but there was something lacking for some reason. It was very emotional and intimate moment, and I was like, okay, let's just play the whole piano solo, which was like 30 bars, and I had the luxury of allowing myself to do that. I had the time to do a couple of takes with listening throughout the whole piano solo, like 30 bars of piano solo, and then they enter the strings, and the whole performance became different. And I'm sure that if they were recording together, it would have been even better. So with the orchestra, sometimes, if the strings are holding a chord or something like this, and then there's like a nice solo on top of that, they don't have the perspective of like understanding what the music is supposed to be.
Oh, absolutely. I just had this conversation yesterday, actually, that when you record in, like, no matter what, if it's just a string ensemble or the entire orchestra, doesn't matter. When you record an ensemble and you just, you record like 8 bars and then move on to the next 8 bars and then move on to the next 8 bars or 12 bars, whatever, you can get a lot of music recorded within 1 hour. Like it's very efficient way to record it and get a nice recording. But musical in a musical way, you get better results if you just play the entire piece. Like not if it's like a 10-minute long piece
Yeah.
of music, but sections, like musical ideas and sections all together. It's like perfect. What you just described perfectly sums that up, in my opinion. Like maybe it might take more time, but you get a better end result in terms of musicality, for sure.
And you guys, you don't because I've always seen you in the control room, but would you like to maybe conduct your music one day, or?
Well, I'm a professional conductor, so I can conduct a bit, but I think I would be a bit overwhelmed on a conductor stand when actually being under time pressure and trying to get the best results from the orchestra, the best performance. I think it's okay to leave that to the expert, and where we have been working with great conductors like you as well.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I think when the team is right, you can collaborate during the session and talk with them, work with them on finding the best performance and best way how to interpret and make the music. Because we had this discussion a while ago that composing the music and preparing it for the session is only part of the creation process. Of course, the music is created in the studio, and you might want to make some changes there. The conductor has some ideas, perhaps, that you don't come up with. And when I'm in a control room, I really like to be focused on listening to what the players are playing, the musicians are playing, and work with the team together. True. And each one is focused on their specialities and their tasks. Yeah.
And tell us a bit about the concerts, because you've been working in Germany to put more video game music. Is there interest in video game music?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the first video game music concert, I think, outside of Japan was in the early 21st century, like 2003 in Germany. So compared to film music concerts that have become a quite regular thing now with symphony orchestras, they play one film music concert or film concert each season at least. Yeah. And it's usually very popular. But video game music concerts are still quite new. And the orchestras are not really used to that. I think it's still a process of getting that established as part of a concert season, and we're still not there. But I noticed the interest is there because there are so many gamers out there, and people that listen to video game music all day long. As we said, some people play the games that we are working on for thousands of hours, and they have listened to that music very often. And and hearing that in a concert can be a new experience, but also can be really cool because they already know it. And for the orchestras, it can be beneficial because it attracts a completely new audience that maybe has never been in a concert, in a symphonic concert before.
And I would also like to add to this that I think that gamers are more familiar with the stuff they like, as you said,
yes, than,
for example, your regular visitor of the concert hall and their like knowledge of Brahms, for example.
Yes.
Yeah. So because I've been there was a concert here in Bulgaria with video game music, and the whole I think the musicians were kind of overwhelmed because they didn't expect this to happen. The hall was completely booked.
Yes.
And then they started playing, and obviously some of the pieces they played were not up to the standard of the recording, let's say this, and they actually got booed by the audience. And this I've never experienced this on a concert. I mean, I've heard very bad renditions of Beethoven, Mozart, whatever, but I've never heard anyone react from the audience in real time.
they are really emotional in concerts, and when it comes to their favorite video games and favorite video game music, absolutely. So, but if the orchestra are doing it right, it's also a great experience. Like, for example, last November there was a concert here in Germany that I co-produced, and the hall was fully booked, like over 1,000 people in there, and it was from all ages. Like, in front of me there was a family of like an 8-year-old kid, his parents, and the grandmother, and they were together at that concert. And I think it was something for everyone in there. And I think some people are still a bit naive on who the audience for video game music concerts actually is. They think it's just the nerds and the people from the kids from the basement that haven't ever seen sunlight. That's still that kind of prejudice sometimes in certain groups of the population. And but it's not that way. And even the grandma of that family was like, "Wow, I didn't know that music was so good, actually." And it was, for example, there was one track in the one piece in the concert program that was a rearrangement of a classical music piece, but was particularly rearranged for a video game, like from Civilization 6.
Yeah.
And she knew that melody from a traditional concert, probably, and she said, "Oh wow, that is also in a video game." And the parents had a great time with her kid, and it was really cool. And the orchestras are really getting to appreciate that as well, because the problem is, and that's also why I am doing this, or doing the effort of trying to get video game music into concert halls, because the people that are deciding what is on the program and what is not, and what concerts are being performed in a concert season, for a long time they haven't known video game music and the repertoire at all. So they don't even know what video game music actually is, how it sounds like, the variety of music that is out there. Like, it's a huge repertoire, and also how to get hold of scores and parts, and what the right situation is. So that is a big hurdle and boundary for the orchestras. So I'm trying to help them in making it possible and co-producing concerts with them.
This is what I was going to ask, because I suppose that getting the rights and finding out who owns because sometimes composers don't own the stuff they've written, and but then someone from the company might not be interested in, because it's a tricky situation.
Music is not really top priority at big publishers, and it's sometimes hard to get hold of the right people at the company who can decide, okay, is it okay to perform? It's usually okay, but someone has to say it's okay, and then you have to get scores that are actually ready for a performance, because, as you know, soundtracks are not always recorded completely live. Maybe just woodwinds, brass, and strings. Maybe the percussion has not been recorded live, or some additional instruments. So is there a concert arrangement, a concert version of that music ready? Who knows that? I mean, hardly any video game music is published by a traditional music publisher in form of scores. So it's a lot of detective work for an orchestra, for example, to get a concert program together. That is also appealing to the community, because it's a different world for some.
Sure.
And that's why they need help or appreciate help, and I'm trying to give that to them.
So first, I want to you guys to think of something to play at the end of this conversation. But before that, I would, while you still think about what to play to the listeners, I would like to ask you our 3 blitz questions. And I know some of them might create a bigger discussion. So I will actually start with the hardest one for me, which would be, what are your 3 most favorite soundtracks? Robin, let's start with you.
I think that's the most hardest question you can think of. Favorite soundtracks? Okay, I would say first Harry Potter movie by John Williams. First Lord of the Rings movie by Howard Shore of The Fellowship. And now it gets really difficult because I have to. I just gonna say 13th Warrior by Jerry Goldsmith.
Okay. All right. So number 2 and number 3 are possibly number 1 and 3 for me. So yeah, kind of. Yannick, for you, what are yours?
Well, my favorite soundtracks are, I think, Civilization 6 is one of my favorite video game scores. Also, I really like the first Assassin's Creed by Jesper Kyd.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one. I think I'll add the Guild 1 soundtrack. It's just the one that influenced me a lot when I was a kid and actually got me started in to actually work in that field. And maybe add the Lord of the Rings soundtrack as well, because Robin and I, we went to a film concert together when we were like 17 years old, and they played Lord of the Rings live to screen. And I thought, okay, wow, that is so intense. I had tears in my eyes. That was an incredible experience, yeah, actually. And I thought, okay, wow, I want to be able to do that at some time. And for what, hear that music, my favorite soundtracks in a concert, but also like creating that music must be incredible. And that also influenced me in becoming a composer for eventually video games. So I think that's also a very important one for me.
I was there was like Lord of the Rings live in concert here in Sofia as well, and I sang on the Fellowship of the Ring. And obviously I know the soundtrack very well, but it was really curious to be able to actually hear the soundtrack from within, because then you notice stuff that you normally wouldn't notice. But one of the weirdest things which you could possibly never hear in the soundtrack is, did you know that there was like a piano which was like, it's an upright and possibly a very old upright that will be destroyed during the concert. So they take the upright piano, they tune it to D minor. So all the strings are like up-tuned or detuned, so it gets like a D minor, like a natural minor mode. And then they start banging on that with like a chain and hammers, and it's usually like da 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 da, the Uruk-hai theme. So the chan 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 chan. There's this piano together with everything else. It was it was weird because the piano was standing right next to me when I was singing, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. You know, because it's such an interesting sound. It makes the whole thing, you know, because I've always, well, this sounds really interesting, but what is it? And now I get to know. On the other hand, I'm like, oh, they're completely destroying a musical instrument. That's so sad.
Very expensive production.
Yes. All right. So, and what would your dream project be? Of it could be film or video game, whatever, concert music, I don't know. Yeah,
to be honest, I have to be really honest. I think I'm very happy with the kind of project that we're working on at the moment, with these historical video game music project, because that's exactly what I've been playing forever. These strategy games with a period setting, working with live orchestra, live soloists. Now that's really a cool a cool kind of work and great projects. It's really a luxury for us. It's really fun, and I would like to write a soundtrack with a lot of choir involved. So whatever it is, but I've never really written a soundtrack with live choir, to be honest. So that would be something I would really like to do, no matter what kind of game it is or film. But that's something that interests me a lot.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Robin, for you?
Well, I have to agree to Yannick. The video games we work on right now, or have worked on right now, are like dream projects, basically. I mean, when I started out, I never imagined to be in the position to record like a whole symphony orchestra 4 times a year for
Yeah.
for different projects. So yeah, I don't have any. Also, I don't have any dream projects. I would say yes. I also want to work on a project with lots of live choir involved, and I have to say, I also have to add to that answer that be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I guess.
Because
Yeah.
people say, I want to write music for the next Star Wars movie. Well, I think, do you really want to write music for the next Star Wars movie? Because I think there's no one better than John Williams writing this kind of music. So when you are in that position to write the next Star Wars movie, what are you gonna do? And that's kind of, to me, it's a scary thought. So nope, I'm really happy with the projects we have right now, and I don't have any dream projects in terms of IP or to work on.
Okay, and if you started out today or yesterday with writing music, what would your advice to a younger version of yourself be?
That's a good question. Maybe don't overthink too much on your future path, because things will turn out differently than you expect anyway. But still follow a certain path along your way. So have an idea on what you want to achieve, have goals that you want to achieve, and try working towards that.
Robin?
It's for me it's difficult. I think relax. What Yannick basically said, like don't stress it. Don't be a tryhard, as they say. But take your craft seriously. Like I think what really helps you once you get your first project. I mean, it's not. People always say, oh, it's so difficult to get your first project. Well, I think it's not that difficult to get your first project. It's more difficult to build upon your first project.
Yes. Or
Afterwards.
next, or first or second or third.
Yeah. So if you're long enough in the game, you will have the opportunity. There will be a first project for you if you do this. If you're on this path long enough. The challenge is how to sustain that project and to build upon it.
Yeah,
So
I think things will open up, right? I mean, but maybe not what you have planned or expected. So I think being open for whatever comes up and being flexible is also super important. For
I just finished a game, like a Country in Space soundtrack, so you never know. You never know.
You wouldn't have expected that, probably, right?
Never even in my weirdest dreams. So
didn't you?
But that's a
didn't
way
you
to make a unique soundtrack, right? A country space soundtrack.
could be, yeah, in a way.
I think you were training for that gig like for years to come, right, George? Like,
Yeah,
you-
secretly playing the banjo.
yeah, in outer space.
Yes. So I really hope that you had thought about what to play at the end of the interview during those last 3 questions, which were kind of hard, but yeah, multitasking. So do you have any idea what to play? And maybe also introduce the piece. Say something interesting about it, about the recording. And
I think it would make sense to play Dragon Boats from Knights of Honor 2, because first of all, that track was written for one of our favorite gaming franchises we've worked on so far. And on this track, you can hear a good friend of us, Bastian Kieslinger, playing the Tal harper. 4 Music did the score preparation for the track as well. So like everyone is kind of involved. Sandro also played ethnic flutes on that track as well. So I think this would be a really nice track, and as it also combines, ethnic instruments, spirit instruments with a live orchestra. Yeah, So I think Dragon Boats would be perfect. What do you think, Yannick?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Gentlemen, thank you once again for being part of this podcast, and I hope that we get to talk again soon.
That would be really cool.
Now let's listen to Dragon Boats from Knights of Honor 2.